A big grumble in first edition comes down to terrain. Terrain could be interpreted in lots of different ways, and it could get quite confusing. As part of this overall sort of consistency in making the rules simpler, more intuitive, and obey the same sort of fundamental principles across the game, terrain has been adapted very, very clearly now. There's several tables that give you all sorts of different terrain, whether it's hills, buildings, woods. It gives you the effect on the game, and that means it is far more easy to follow. What it does mean though, and it highly recommends that you have all your terrain on defined bases. In the past you might see in games of Baron's War where you might have a wood that was separate trees, and where the edge was and the boundary to it could be a bit vague. To help the gameplay, it's now structured in having very specific designated templates for your terrain, so that there's no question on where this bit of rough ground starts or finishes. I'm not really going to talk through all the different types of terrain. I think that really does need a separate video, so myself and Bart will probably set one of those up fairly soon. But to give you a rough sort of idea, there's basically 4 types of terrain. You can have open terrain, like the middle of here, there's nothing in the way, it's not affected movement or anything like that. You've got area terrain, and area terrain can be difficult or it can be very difficult, and they will have effects. If it is difficult terrain, then the moment that you enter it, it is taking a quarter off your movement. You lose 25%. One of the things that could slow down playing, particularly if you're playing in a tournament and you've got 4 games to get through and your head's hurting because it's game 3 and you've been concentrating for too long, your blood sugar levels have dropped, trying to do a quarter of 5 inches in your head starts to become like, take away this, add this, and it got quite confusing. It's made it far more simple now. From the moment that you enter the terrain, you're losing a quarter. So this monk here, this militant monk, who's charging through this marshy land, getting his sandals wet, 2 inches takes him to the edge. That means he's got 4 inches left, and he's going to lose a quarter. That means he's going to lose an inch. So he'll just move 3 inches into it. So you very clearly need a start of the area terrain and an end. So you need to mark that out fairly clearly with your terrain pieces. If it was very difficult, the same 25% applies, but you just can't run through it anymore, which again makes it much simpler. So that's open and area terrain. The third type is an obstacle, and as long as it is less than an inch high and less than an inch wide, that counts as an obstacle. And just like in first edition, cavalry get over it in 1 inch, whereas infantry get over it, it takes them 2. And you can't really have units half one side, half the other. If there's not enough for them all to get over, then they don't. They're either all over or they're not. They'll stand there and help each other over or whatever, yeah. And then the last type is buildings, and they have their own set of rules now. So you have to decide with those 4 pieces whether it's open, area, obstacle or buildings. You then have to decide how it affects line of sight. So does it block line of sight like this building, or if this was a very tall fence, does it block line of sight? So is it line of sight blocking? You also need to check how it affects their movement. So for instance, the obstacle taking 2 inches off infantry to go, or the other one is that you need to consider is defense. So obstacles particularly give you an automatic defense reaction if you are immediately behind it. And if you are defending an obstacle and you are shot at, you don't have to have the force back. You just stay against the obstacle that's giving you defense. Hills also give you a defensive position. Another interesting one that has appeared within this set of rules is roads. Roads were ever only on Baron's Warboards for show before, whereas now they actually do something. So with the road, if you start and can do all your movement on the road, it adds an extra inch. So if you've got 4 knights, 1, 2, 3, 4 knights on this road, instead of being able to just move 4 inches, they can now move 5 if they stay completely on the road. And if they want to run, then it suddenly means these heavy clanky knights charging down the road can actually make 10 inches now. So roads can be a nice useful thing to get across the board. Bear that in mind if you're playing a scenario like Messenger and you've got to get across the board. So that's terrain. We'll do an extra video on it, but it has changed, far clearer, far simpler, and should lead to much quicker games. One of the things that hasn't changed is the scenarios. The scenarios are pretty similar to the ones that you've been playing in first edition. If they're not broke, don't fix it. What has happened though is they've changed it around a little bit to make it a little bit more flowing with your choice of scenarios. So rather than just pick one and pick a deployment zone, there's actually a table now. So it's structured so that if you've just got a pickup game, if you're going down the club and you haven't really decided what game you want to play and you go, what should we play? There is now a table and you can just roll on the table. The table will give you the scenarios, which scenario you're going to play, and it also, there's a table to roll the deployment zone, so the two together give you a huge amount of possibilities. And the same mix is there. Most of the scenarios are exactly the same. There's a mixture of killing point games, there's a mixture of objective games, and again it's the same in that you score them by how many are within 3 inches of the edge. They're all on 40 mils is what it recommends. So there's objective games, killing games, and then there's a couple of get across the board type games. So that bit is as you would expect, but just nice and tightened and flowing, nice table to give you that randomised factor. So I've saved the best till last. How do you build your retinue? Well, overall, it's pretty similar to how you've always done it. What has changed is that it is far more streamlined, far more easy to follow, less confusing, less clunky, and far more intuitive, like the overall philosophy has been throughout the start with second edition. So what you do is you buy a group of warriors and you buy a type, so whether it's your foot knights or your militant monks or your archers or your sergeants or your spearmen, you buy a group and you decide on their veterancy, and they can be veteran, regular, irregular, green. That bit hasn't changed. What has changed is that they are not loaded up with skills and armor and weapons that get very confusing. If you had sergeants with spears or falchions and you had to take that off and give them crossbows instead, you're trying to add and take away and you don't know what's included, what's not included, whether their ability goes up or down. It got very clunky. Whereas now it's just a flat stat, and it does not matter what type of warrior you are, whether you're a knight or a mounted knight or a sergeant or levy. It's the same numbers that you only have to learn, right? So you only have to learn one set of numbers. For instance, everybody is going to move at 6. It changes if you put them on a horse. It changes if you put them in armour, but their basic number is 6. So you're buying them virtually naked, really. Right? If you buy them at a veterancy level, then their to hit is 5. So veterans hit on a 5. Then you get regulars always hit on a 6. Irregulars always hit on a 7. And green always hit on an 8. It doesn't matter what sort of warrior they are. If they're a tier 1 warrior, those are the numbers. I'm going to come to the different tiers in a minute. But tier 1 warriors, at a certain veterancy, they'll all have the same stats. What then changes is when you buy them, you have options of stuff that you can buy for them, and things that you have to buy for them. So, for instance, if you're buying some bowmen, you've got to buy a bow. So that will be in a must column. So you would add the cost of a bow onto their cost as an individual. If you want to put them in armour, you've got a choice. If you put them in padded armour, you're adding a point. If you're putting them in mail, you're adding 2 points. So any weapons or armour or horses, that just adds onto their basic veterancy cost. So it's much simpler. You don't have to be faffing about adding things, taking away things, and not knowing what the stats do. It's a very simple thing to add and build up your groups. You then have the option of adding abilities, and just like in the first edition, if you want to buy a list of abilities for your different groups, they're there. The list available is a bit smaller, just from playtesting over the years, both with second edition and the first edition. There were abilities that weren't being used, there were abilities that were too highly costed, some that were too lowly costed. So there's just been a rationalisation, and the abilities that are left are the really useful ones, but they're not overcosted in any way. Seem very balanced. So you would then add that to the unit that you're buying. So that gives you how you build your warriors, tier 1. So that's your normal guys. Those groups have 1 action each. You need some commanders. There are 2 extra tiers. Tier 3 is your baron. They are the guys that have 3 actions. You're often your retinue leader. They're the top guys around in the game. They cost a bit more, but they've got extra increases on their stats. So they're tier 3. You can have lords who are tier 2. They have 2 actions, and then the tier 1 is your normal warriors. So that's how you build your forces up, and it's far easier to do. I think people will get far less confused in how they structure their retinues. There are some slight changes as well, again just semantic changes to stop some confusion. So one of the things that was confusing, I've seen a few people do this in first edition, was there's a type of commander called a veteran sergeant in first edition, and veteran sergeants could be in a group of sergeants who were veteran. So you could have a veteran sergeant, or you could have a regular veteran sergeant in a group of sergeants who could be veteran, who could be regular. It got very confusing. And so what's happened is they've just had a name change. So now they're not veteran sergeants, they're sergeants at arms. Just clears it up nice and simply, just a name change, but it makes it very clear to people. Further name change, just to tidy things up a little bit, is that in first edition you can have sergeants. You can have sergeants with melee weapons, or you could take those melee weapons off them. You'd have to change the costings around a bit and then buy crossbows for them to have missile veterans. Whereas now it's much clearer, there's two types. You've got your normal veterans, who are your melee troops, and you can have what's called marksman sergeants. So marksman sergeants are your crossbowmen. Right? These are the guys who are probably highly paid mercenaries. And one of the abilities that you get with your marksman is that crossbow can normally only shoot once in a turn, whereas marksman sergeants, they can shoot twice in a turn. So I would expect to see quite a few marksman sergeants on the field nowadays. Very effective, particularly at close range. So that's another semantic change that just makes the game a bit clearer. There are some changes to weapons to carry on this sort of the theme that now you're not just adding attack dice or taking attack dice away as a modifier. Quite often now you're changing the number that you need to get, and that's reflected in some of the weapon changes. Battle axes have changed. So with a battle axe, what it does is it makes the defense roll on shields, the shield roll, worse for the opponent. So it increases their target number to make the defense roll on their shield to a higher number. So if they've got a medium shield, which is a 7, and you hit it with a battle axe, then they're saving it on 8s. That's battle axes. Crossbows at short range, they still get the criticals. So if you shoot somebody with a crossbow at short range with a 0, then they can only defend that hit with another 0. When it comes to swords, swords have changed in a very nice way. I like this. I've got a historic martial art background, so I was very keen on this. Swords used to give you an extra dice for your defense. So if you'd been hit 5 times, you'd get an extra dice if you were using a sword to parry against certain other types like other swords. That's changed to stick with this overall theme of trying to rationalise things and remove the extra dice that kept appearing. What happens now is that if you're armed with a sword and a shield, the shield, when it comes to defence, is improved by 1 if you've got a sword with it. If you've got a medium shield, which is a defence of 8, then if you're backing that up with a sword, then that 8 suddenly becomes a 7. So the sword and shield together, very effective. Of course, you can't use it in missile combat. There's no parrying a crossbow bolt with your sword, so the sword only adds to your shield defence in hand-to-hand. That tags on to two-handed swords. Two-handed swords now give you a much better chance to hit. You're hitting on +2. So if you needed a 7 to hit, you're hitting on a 5. They're slow. It means you act after the opponent has done their attack if they're counter-attacking you. But it's giving you that +2, and also it's two-handed. You can't use a shield, but swords you do parry with. There's something called half sword, and you can use it very effectively to parry with. So again, with two-handed swords, if you haven't got a shield, it gives you a shield save of 9. So two-handed swords, didn't really see them. I reckon in the 2nd edition they're quite an effective thing to put with some hard hitting. Lances. Lances are the weapon that you very rarely saw with your mounted knights. It's quite expensive. Did cause shock. Shock isn't in the game now. So they've lost that. They've needed a bit of improvement. And I think this will make them quite effective. I'm looking forward to painting some up to use them. So a lance, in their first use, obviously they break after that, but in their first attack, you're adding +2 to your attack. That's massive. Not only that, but it also does what's called piercing. Piercing removes all the defense on the opponent, so they will go down to their base save, which is 7+. So you're getting +2 to hit and removing their save off them. Absolutely devastating. And not only that, once you hit them, they have to take a morale test. Scary. Lances will be scary. Barded horses. Barded war horses have changed. So in first edition, that extra points, 13, 14 points, whatever it was, you're adding onto a mounted knight to turn him into a tank, effectively. So these were beasts. They had an attack from the warhorse as well as from the knight, and they would do something called overcharge, which means that once they'd done some casualties, they'd come out of the back. They could potentially hit a second unit, and if they did too many casualties and you'd make a roll, they might disappear off the board, and that could be a bit scary. So they were a bit of a double-edged sword. They felt it was a bit too dominating in a game, and they've rationalised it. So mounted knights are still good, but you don't have the barded warhorse craziness anymore. Right? They're a bit more dependable, a bit more reliable on how you use them. They do have some abilities that can replicate some of the overcharge. So knights will only have 1 wound each. There's no extra wound garnered by your warhorse. You do gain 2 new abilities. One is called close ranks. Just like when you're defending, if you elect to charge with these guys, they can do close ranks, which means you pull them in nice and tight, riding knee to knee. Once you're doing that, it means the opponent, as long as you're going 6 inches or more, the opponent needs to take a morale test. It's quite scary, stood in front of a bunch of charging knights who are riding knee to knee at you on war horses. So you have to make the morale test. If you don't, you're broken. You don't run away yet, they hit you, and then you run away. So close ranks is a useful ability. And there is also ride down. Ride down is the one that gives you a sort of tempered down overcharge. If you elect to do that, you get +2 on your hits. Now I'll refer you back to the fact that you get +2 to your hits with a lance. So if you're riding down with a lance, that's +4 to hit. You do your casualties, and then you measure, rather than a random amount, you're not pushing the unit back. That could get confusing if there was things behind. They stay where they are now. You ride through them and you do a move. So for these guys it would be 7 inches, so they would move up to 7 inches in the direction of their charge. If they happen to hit another unit, then you resolve another round of combat straight away. So that's very much like your overcharge. It might be that there isn't anything to charge directly behind, but there might be an obstacle. This was a huge bugbear in first edition, because you'd get sort of push these guys back, come out of the back. Can you go over the obstacle or not? It's much clearer now. So what happens now is, killed 2 of these, they're riding them down, they come out the back, they've got 7 inches of movement, Right, they straight away got to a fence. That takes an inch. They've got 6. So you would just move them 6 inches past. Nice and simple. Much simpler than before. A huge big bugbear that often happened, which again just didn't seem right. Let's orientate this so you can see. Impassable terrain, a building, right? Horses can't go into the building, they can't ride through it. In the old rules, in the first edition rules, if you came out the back and you hit this wall and you're in overcharge, then what would happen is you would lose a casualty, because you'd be riding headlong into this half-timbered house. Right? That never felt right. Always found a bit like, well, these are trained knights on trained war horses. They've been doing this since they were 14 years of age, so didn't seem right. So now, if you come through and you contact the building, you just stop. Much simpler, far more realistic. You just stop. They rein in and stop where they are. So that's war horses. Nerfed, yeah. 1 wound instead of 2. So they're not the great unstoppable tanks that you used to have, but they're still useful. They really are still useful. With that ride down, with the +2 to hit, you time that right, hit on a right angle, you can take yourself through 2 units. Lovely, they can be a huge game changer. So that is a rough, quick, although it probably feels like we've spoken for quite a while, that is a quick, rough, what's changed in the game. Do I like it? Hell yeah. This is a much better game. I've always loved Baron's War from the start of playing it the first time. But it did have its issues. To be fair to Andy, first edition was written during lockdown. So hardly the best time to try and play test a game and get it all nice and functional for a wargaming public. So it did have its issues. There were some things that weren't that intuitive. If you're designing a game and you're only playing in a small circle with your mates, you all play in the same way, you all understand what he's on about, and nobody really thinks to question it. The change comes when it hits a mass market and loads of people then break it, or get confused by it, or don't understand that word, or add things instead of taking things away, and things like that. So it is a great game. Second edition is a much better game. You'll play faster, it will be more intuitive. Lots of the little clunky things that just didn't seem to work or would throw up, like, oh, what does that do? I've pushed him back to the wall. Do you go over the wall? Do you stop at the wall? All of that is now cleared up. So you'll have a much faster game because all the stats that you need to learn in your head, you will know. Veterans are always hitting on a 4. You don't need to go and look anywhere else. It's just in your head. It doesn't matter whether they're a veteran monk or a veteran knight. It's all the same. So it plays faster and it looks pretty. The new artwork, very in keeping with the old artwork. You'll see lots of pictures you've seen before, but there's lots of new stuff. And you combine that up with all the new plastics that are coming out. This is a great game. Hopefully this will rocket charge this game and it will be the big skirmish game. And on top of that, you've also got these second edition rules and then just a template, and you can chuck all sorts of things in at it. So you can be playing Outremer with this. You can be playing the new fantasy game with this. There's an anarchy supplement somewhere hanging around in the ether. There might be other periods in there as well. So watch this space. I love the fact that you can learn one set of rules and use it for lots of different things. So guys, get it as quick as you can.